Hi everybody, welcome back to Art on the Creek, and this is lesson number five of our beginner watercolor series. Today, I thought since we had so much fun painting that romantic sunset last week, we could do something that still is kind of ocean related. How about we paint a breaching humpback whale? It's a photo I've chosen that I think looks a little bit complicated and might scare you off, but I'm going to show you some tricks that'll actually make it quite easy. Are you ready? Let's go have some fun. All of our supplies that we need. We've got our Winsor Cotman set of watercolors. We have our cold press watercolor book from Paul Rubens, and we have a pencil, a Hi Polymer Eraser so it won't smudge, and we've got our Snap Princeton brushes. This is the set that I've recommended. It comes in a number 4 round, number 6 round, and a 3/4 stroke. I'll link to everything in the description as I always do. I've got a couple of new supplies to talk to you about in this video that'll help us get through some of these more complicated looking parts, and I will link to those too. It's a gel pen and some bleed proof white. The part that might scare you off are the water splatters. I'm going to show you a way that we can ignore that for now and just do a little cool technique at the end. It's fun. It's kind of messy, but I really like it. And other than that, it's just the ocean and the whale. So let's get to it. Let's see here. I'm going to start with his eye. It's open and it's right about here. Now this is kind of tiny, so we want to keep that in mind. And then he has kind of a ridge over his eye here, and then the other eye is right back here. Okay, we can't see it, that's just a ridge. So let's go ahead and get his nose, snout, I don't know what that's called on a whale. Get that in, and it's very bumpy. So I'm just kind of making little dotted lines. He has some lines under here. Here's where the white is. If drawing this whale is a little bit intimidating for you, don't worry. There are a lot of ways you can replicate this drawing, or rather this photo, that are very, very simple, so you don't have to just try and draw what you see. One way to do it is to print out, I've got a link to the photo in the description, so just print that out on black and white setting on your printer, and just a regular home printer. And then when you get that picture printed, take a Sharpie or some other good black marker and trace around the parts that you want to be able to see when you're tracing. Tape that up to a sunny window, or just a window that has light coming through it. It doesn't even have to be sunny, and this is assuming you don't have a light box. Tear your sheet of watercolor paper out of your book and tape it over the paper that you've got taped to the window, and just trace those black lines that you've drawn. There are lots of ways to do it. You can also make a grid and then replicate what you see on the grid and then erase your grid lines. You can also color on the back of the photo that you've printed out with just a pencil, just color it solid with a pencil, and then flip it over, put that on top of your watercolor paper, and with another pencil just trace over the lines that you want to be copied down onto your paper. You can use a piece of graphite paper to, like a copy paper. There's so many ways you can do this. So I don't want drawing to be intimidating for you. Tracing is not cheating. Even the masters often use some kind of assistance to get their drawings accurate. So don't ever think you're cheating by tracing something. You're learning, and that's what learning is all about. So let's skip ahead to the end here, because I do want to talk about that horizon line just a little bit. Now for the horizon line, that's really the one I want to focus on, is this right back here. There we go, just very lightly, we want to have that in there. And let's see, there's a few mountains back here. Kind of make something up there. And let's just make that come down here, because that way the whale will be going this way, the mountains will be going this way, and that will give us an interesting focal point, which so happens to be the whale itself. So I think I've got his snout just a little bit too short, so I'm gonna lower. Let me just make a little adjustment here. There, I think that's a little bit better. Whales are always kind of a little bit odd looking to me. I think they look like they're upside down. Like, how can I explain it? Like they're, the way that the mouth opens, I always expect that to be the top of it. I don't know. All right, we'll put a little bit more here. All right, and then here is where we're gonna have him coming out of the water. And if you notice right there, it's kind of darker right where the whale is coming out. And that is because he's casting a shadow on the water. So that ought to make for a good marker for us. There, and that's about all we're gonna need for this painting so far. So let's start off with our 3/4 inch stroke and we'll get it wet. Now I'm gonna avoid the whale. We're just gonna focus on the water for now. We're gonna do another wet on wet technique. I think we've done that on most of our paintings so far. So very carefully, we wanna get that brush to go everywhere the whale isn't and staying below the horizon for now. Along the flipper, down here. And how much water should you use? Well, we need to have it have a nice sheen. So sometimes I find if I pick it up, I can see it better. The sheen should be even and it should be shiny. So I do not have enough water on here. There we go. I'll keep tipping this against the light, hoping that you guys can see about how much water we need. And we might have to re-wet this. So let's start with our ultramarine blue. That's such a good place to start. That's this one right here, with an ocean, or a sky for that matter. But let's start here, and before we get into this too much, do you see how right in through here on the painting there is a lighter spot? So let's kind of focus the pigment above and below that. Just want to get a base wash of this ultramarine in for now, so nothing has to be exact. We just want to kind of say where things are. Now I'm going to show you a little trick for times like this when you get some paint where you don't want it. I've got my brush wet and I'm going to blot it off, and then I'm going to just lift that out like so. You just agitate it, and then I'll take a dry paper towel and blot that out, and there you go. Now we're all set. Let's see here. I want this blue to come in more towards his head, so let me get a little bit more blue on there. Now while this is still damp, you want to go into the other blue that we have, which is a Prussian blue. And this is a darker blue. So let's focus some of this down here where our whale would be casting a shadow. And do you see how I'm skipping space? I'm just leaving little parts where that ultramarine is going to show through. We'll put more of this back toward the horizon like we did on our sunset. There we go. And then this little part in here, we'll just do that with the very corner of the brush, just a little bit. Now let me pick this up a little bit so I can see my horizon line again, because I think, yep, I got that left side just a little too low. There we go. All right, now let's just let those settle for a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and get the heat tool and dry this one, or you can let your painting dry naturally. And with watercolor, if you could see that, you'll notice that the color got a little bit lighter as soon as we dried that. So that's all quite normal. Now I've got this mix over here that's kind of a greenish blue. If you don't have that, if you don't have this on your palette, you can mix some Prussian blue with some of that cadmium yellow hue. That's this one here and this one. So just kind of warm up that Prussian blue just a little. Gives us kind of an oceany teal green. And we're gonna darken some of these areas. to just kind of show the waves in the water a little bit. And let's see, we've just got little bits here and there in the front. Water's fairly still. Now, where he's coming out of the water, that is really quite dark right there. So let's go into our Prussian blue, and we'll mix it just over here. Find a place on your palette. It doesn't matter where. You can pick up some of this other color. That's fine. And then let's go into some of our burnt umber. We're going to darken this Prussian blue. We're going to make it almost a really dark green. There, do you see that? How that mixed up kind of dark? Now we're going to tap this in right around the base of our whale. And let's see, we'll pull it out just a little bit this way. I'm going just very lightly. And now I'm going to get my brush wet so there aren't these hard lines here. And I'm just going to kind of pull that around like so. Very lightly, just with a wet brush, just kind of pulling that wet pigment around. And now I'm going to turn it around so that I can work on the sky without setting my hand in that. So I want to go back into the ultramarine, and we can go ahead and do it over here. I'm trying to get a good load of this ultramarine here. And I'm just going to put it up along this top edge. And now with my number 6 round, I'm going to turn this back around here. And be careful don't to set your hand there. I'm going to tip this up so I've got gravity working for me. With a wet brush, I'm going to agitate this pigment and bring it down to that horizon line where the mountains are. Over his nose. You just want to kind of get rid of that hard line. Let me zoom in so you can see what I'm doing. If you can hear that, I'm sorry. Our adult daughter lives with us, and she's upstairs making a smoothie. Sounds like. Today's her day off, so she's home enjoying life. I'm actually glad she got kind of lucky this week with her days off. We got a huge snowstorm yesterday. Yesterday and today are her days off, and she didn't have to drive into work. So that makes this mama really happy, because you know what? They're always your babies, aren't they? No matter how old they get. I do worry about them. Just trying to keep this wet enough. I'm having a little bit of struggle with that here today because it's so dry. All right, so more of the ultramarine now. We're going to just keep the paper tipped up. I'm going straight into that ultramarine pigment with a wet brush and putting more across the top. Getting my number 6 round wet again and just loosening up that line so that that pigment will fall down and create that nice skyline. Right here, when it gets like this, that's a little too much water. So all you have to do is dry your brush off, just roll it on a paper towel. And then when your brush is thirsty like that, it'll just pick it right up. Don't want to have these different lines of striation of color there. So I'm just kind of evening that out. And I think this is okay. I got on his nose just a little bit, so don't worry about that because the whale's gonna be darker than that, so we can just paint right over. So there's the sky. Let's go ahead and dry that again. Alrighty, now, surprise, surprise, I am gonna clean off my palette a little here. I'm just going to take a wet paper towel and wipe this down. Now we're gonna paint this mountain ridge in here. And if you can see on the picture, it's just not very dark at all. So I'm gonna take some of this ultramarine. And I'm gonna go in with just a little bit of Prussian blue. and then a tiny bit of the burnt umber. Now I want to get this pretty watery. It's kind of like a denim blue is what you're looking for. And you don't have to do this shade. You can do whatever shade of mountains you want. But this is kind of just showing you different ways to mix colors, really. So now I've got my number 6 round still, and I'm just going to paint in these mountains. And I want to keep them lighter than the dark in the whale. That's what I'm going for here. There we go. And I think what I'll do with that is I'll bring the flipper up into that little white space because that's kind of challenging, isn't it? Let's do this side. There, I think that's good for now. I'm going to dry that also. All right, I'm really liking how this is looking so far. We've got some nice play of the light here with the way that the paint ran with the water just so naturally. Set that out of the way so it doesn't get wet. And now it's time to work on our whale. The eye we're going to just avoid for now because it's so tiny and we want to go in later, maybe even with a pen. I'm not sure. So keep that in mind. Let's start with a number 6 and then we'll move to a 4 if we need to. We're going to mix, trade places here because I want to make sure that I don't get paint all over the whale. Let's go in with this Prussian blue. And we can use this same mixing spot. And this time, we're going to add even more burnt umber. So that's a pretty dark foresty green. And now I want to add just a touch of the ultramarine. And what that will do is it's going to take it away from the green and bring it more toward a gray. Because I'm looking for a very rich gray blue that's darker than the other one that we've used. There we go. Sometimes when you mix, you really have to use more paint than you think you would do. And that's what's happening here. Now that's a very rich dark blue, but I want it to be a little more toward gray than that. So I'm going in, I'm mainly using the burnt umber and the ultramarine, but I did want a little bit more of that Prussian blue in there because I want it to reflect that color of the ocean. Okay, that's a very dark, rich blue. Let me just show you on a paper towel kind of what we're going for here. Very dark, dark blue-gray. Okay? All right, so now this is our whale color. So just with your number 6 round, we're going to start and put that pigment on the darkest areas of our whale. And just very subtly, I'm going to add some bumps by just pushing that paint away from the drawing that I've made, just tiny bits here and there. Again, remember to stay away from the eye. All of the little white lines around his eye and his flipper, we can add those with the gel pen. So just don't worry one bit about avoiding those. I'm going to show you that how beneficial a gel pen is to have in your art supply kit. Just trying to keep this all smooth and together. And then this one, basically, the line comes out here and then it pulls away from the top. We've got this very bottom here. He's got a spot down here. Up here, there's a spot. And then I think along here, there's some very tiny dots. And there are also some dots in here. Let's see. Hey, Mr. Whale. Alrighty. Now, while that's drying, what I want to do is to mix some more. We're going to mix this time ultramarine, and now I want you to go into your burnt sienna. That's the one right next to the burnt umber. And this will give us a really nice dimensional black. And it's going to work well with this other color we mixed. Can you see on your palette how those colors are separating and creating those different pools of different pigments? That's what makes dimensional colors so great in watercolor, because what happens is the light bounces off of the paper actually and through all of these layers of watercolor that we're putting down, and it hits your eye. So you're seeing all these layers of color. And being able to put that dimensionality to it is really great. Okay. That's what we're looking for, a nice gray. Tap off your brush. And now we're gonna kind of just make some designs here in our little whale. How are we centered? Yes. And just some little dots. I'll zoom in a little so you can see this better. So he's got some dots on his nose. So mainly what you're going for is that this pigment you're using now should be darker than the one that you used before. Down here it can be smoother because of a technique we're going to do later. But I do want to pick up these kind of stripes that are on his skin. So let's do this. Pretty runny, about the texture of skim milk. Tap off your brush. We're going to do this shadow here that his flipper is making. So right under here and right to there. Bring that under his flipper, and then take your paper towel and just very lightly tap it off. That's all we need right there. And let's see, we're going to go back into that blue wash, roll your brush off, and now we're going to do something called dry brush technique. So you take your brush and you hold it to the side, and what we're going to do with this blue here that we've got, you've put it in your brush, sorry, in your palette, roll off the excess and hold it parallel to your painting and just drag it across the surface. Do you see what that does? It adds this really nice texture that you don't have to put in all those dots. The paper will do this work for you. So this is really fun. I love dry brush technique. Let's do a little bit on his chin as well. You want to use a very light pressure when you do this. Remember, less is more. And on his stomach. So mountain a little bit. And just for fun, I'm going to go back into that darkest one that we've done. Roll that off and do some of this dry brush technique on his body. We'll go over here to add some dimension to that blue that we just put down. There. Now it's time for the heat tool again. And when you get to this point in your painting, you'll often notice that your values need a little bit of adjustment, and that's exactly what's happening here. I'm going to pick up our number 4. We're going to go into this puddle of blue that we have. And I think it was mostly ultramarine. Let's go ahead and get into that black, because we don't have an indigo, which is a really dark blue. We don't have that in this set. So we're going to just blacken up this blue. That's a little too black, but you want to use a little bit of your black and some of that ultramarine. We're just looking for a really dark, dark blue. That's really good right there. And then with your number 4 brush, we need to darken this shadow up right here up against our whale. So very lightly. And in fact, let's do just a little bit more of the ridges in the water, the little the waves this way. back into this dark here. There's a little bit over here. Just to really show that that whale is making a big impact on the water, big shadow. There, I've blackened that up a little bit. You don't want to use pure black. And the reason for that is just simply because it will just read to our eye as just kind of flat. We want to keep our blacks with the mixed colors, and this one we can use the black to darken up the ultramarine a little bit to make it work for our purposes, because the light is coming from that direction, and now we've got our shadow established. All right, now before I get into the gel pen, I'm just going to clean this up right here. Let me zoom way in so that you can see what I'm talking about. This line right here, there's a white space. I'm going to make sure that that is covered because I don't want him to look like he's a cut and paste. Is there anywhere else I need to adjust? I think we're pretty good. All right, so zooming back out, in first, out. Okay, now I want to show you a gel pen. These are available just about everywhere. Frankly, this one is my favorite. It is the Jelly Roll Sakura pens. This is an 08. They come in an 08 and a 0.1, I think. This one is the thinner one. They might come in a 6 or something, but when you first open it, if you've used it before or if you haven't used it yet, you might see that there are some little bits of gel on the tip of the pen. I like to wipe those off before I use it on the next piece of art. And then what I also like to do, I like to test it just to make sure it's working, and it is. All right, now if we zoom way in on our picture, our whale has all kinds of little dots. Here, I'll zoom in here so you can see what we're doing too. There we go. Our whale has all these little dots around his eye. Now the only thing you want to be real careful about using a gel pen is you want to be sure to use it on dry paper. So I'm just kind of adding all of these wrinkles and striations that we see on our whale. Lots of little dots for texture. You know, a lot of times in watercolor, we like to say that we leave space for highlights and we leave the whites, but sometimes that just doesn't happen. Sometimes we forget, sometimes, you know, whatever, life gets in the way. And you just want to be able to add that white later. Well, this is a great way to do it. Either like this or with gouache. Clean up this line around his eye a little bit because I am going to go in there with another pen and we'll do we'll do his pupil. That's the black and the ultramarine. And let's just darken up this bit on his flipper just a little. Now, as promised, his eye. 2 ways to do this. If you have a really super steady hand and you want to do it, you can go ahead and get your number 4. You get into that lamp black. This is a perfectly good time to use the black. It's such a small dot. And I would practice this on another sheet of paper, but you're just going to be putting a tiny little dot for an eye. So let's see if we can do that. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can always use some kind of a black fine liner. They come in permanent inks or water-based inks. Just remember, if you use one with a water-based ink, that it will run if you get water next to it. So maybe better to go with a permanent fine liner. Let's just see if we can get that little dot in there. There it is. And I'll zoom in a little bit more for you, if I can. There we go. I'm gonna add just a tiny bit. I'm barely touching the paper. Some lines around the eye. It looks like that's what he's got. I don't know if that's what he has for sure. There. Let's get some extra paper towels here. I'm gonna cover my computer. And my workspace. Okay, so set up one more here. Now, you can do this with a lot of different ways. I'm going to use our number 6 round. The product that I want to introduce you to, if I haven't already, is called Bleed Proof White. This is a Daler Rowney. It works the best for me in my climate. P.H. Martin also makes one. The Chinese white in your kit, in your palette, is not opaque. So we want something really opaque for all these water splashes. So this is where we're going to have some fun. We're getting the brush pretty wet. Big drop of water on that brush there. Putting it in. We got to have a lot of water to do this. This is water-soluble ink, and I use it often. Okay, so you see how soupy that is there? Now you're just going to take and tap that brush, and you're making splatters, see? So there's a lot of ways you can tap the brush too. You can use your finger as I did, or you can use another brush. So whatever works for you. I think the finger works better. I'll show you another method. Get it really wet. Again, get a lot on there. You can kind of like throw dagger points at it, like you're throwing darts, and that will give you bigger splashes. Another way to do it is with a toothbrush. I'm holding it a little bit closer to the paper where I want the splashes to concentrate. And then when I want them to be a little smaller and random, I could come away from the paper. Ooh, got a big one on his eye right there. I might take that one off. There we go. And then if that happens to you when you're doing this, I've got my number 4 brush. It's wet. I've just wiped it off. And I'm just going to blend that in for now. And I can come back and work on that in a minute here, you know. And there's a great way to prevent that. Let's just cover our whale right there. There we go. All right, back to our fun splatter time. Lots of this product on our brush. Lots of splatters. Trying to concentrate them right around the bottom. That, I think that's good. Rinse that off, pull this out. Okay, let me get this dry. I think, let's zoom in and look at his eye here. I think there's just a little touch of his eye that I want to go back in and pay attention to. And let me just go in and reestablish that little line there. There. Now the other thing I really like to use the heat tool for is to take off our tape. So let's do that. The advantage of this is it will help release the adhesive that's underneath the tape. Now let me first show you what to do if you don't have a heat gun. You're going to want to take off the tape at an angle perpendicular to where you put it on. So the tape's going this way. I want to pull in this direction very slowly. See, this is my old washi tape. I end up getting leaks under it. But you just want to go very, very slowly. And if you ever see paper coming off on the tape, stop what you're doing. And if you don't have a heat gun, use a blow dryer or something. And let's see here. We are all done with our whale. Let me go ahead and get some of that bleed proof white. Here's the other really good reason to have this around. I'm using my number 6 this time. Number 4 would work too. Want it a little bit thicker. And I'm just going to go over this little part here where it went under the tape. Get a little bit thicker piece of it. And I might have to go over that again. But for now, I'm going to call that good. Let's go ahead and get our pen and sign this one. And don't forget to date your work. It's always good to look back and see how far you've come, because that's what we're doing here. We're just learning. Every day is a chance to improve. So there you go, guys. I hope you had fun painting this whale with me. We'll see you next time. Have a great week. Thanks again for joining along in this 5th beginner watercolor lesson in our series. In the description below, if you've missed them, I'll have a playlist of all of these lessons so you can catch up. See you next time. Take care, guys. Bye now.